Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the 5th book in the Mage Errant series, The Siege of Skyhold, chapters 1 through 6, Breathe, Philosophy of Armor, Loarna of the Vault, Enchantments, Empty Palaces, and Salt Flats. In these chapters, our friends are recovering from the battle, and it's not been that long, really, and everybody is getting exciting treats because there's lots of loot left over. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. Ooh, Dan just comes out with finally the reason I wanted to commission this entire series. I love hearing that. I'm very excited. I'm trying to not let myself get too built up, but just, you're on notice that I am excited. I know what you mean, too. We all have this, right? There's a book or series that I've covered, and I'm like, there is just one event that I am dying for. And I know there's other shit that's, more important or better or whatever. I need to get to this point. And I have had to really learn to slow myself down because I will overschedule the number of chapters or whatever in order to make it happen. But, I then am looking back, why didn't I let myself have more room to talk about that? So these chapters are really how long? Maybe a month or two? Yeah, it says they'd been in the sheltered valley and Skyreach range for several weeks. So we'll put it on 3 weeks, I don't know how, if this is one of those fantasy worlds where we call things different words than weeks, months, and years, seasons. But I feel like they've said weeks and months and seasons in the book so far. So I feel like we can just go with regular time versus, Game of Thrones and the way things work there. God knows. So this is close enough to the end of the last book that, and I mean, they all have been, but because this battle was so huge and it really changes things for Hugh, and I feel like this is going to be I don't want to say necessarily an ongoing thing, getting your hand cut off, for example, which you then have to figure out how to deal with, or if it's going to be he has to overcome it, but he does eventually get to the other side and turns out to be fine. And for the record, I'm fine with either one. I had said last episode that being able to heal real quick, sometimes I don't like it. But if you allow the character to have to live with the thing for long enough that they really understand the reality of having to live that way, I think that's enough. I'm just interested in sort of that aspect of what does this character do when certain options are taken away from them. So yeah, exactly. MX Shard is in the chat and says lung damage can easily go either way. And that's kind of why I'm saying this, because I have lung damage. I used to get bronchitis a lot as a kid. And then when I got older, I wound up with bad pneumonia. And I was in London at the time and got free healthcare because I was fucking coughing up blood. And I honestly can say I don't think I would have gone. I went because I was coughing up blood and I didn't know that they had socialized medicine. I didn't understand what that meant. So I waited till then to go because I didn't want to pay for the doctor. And then they didn't bill me. And I walked out of there feeling like I'd stolen something and that they were going to come after me. I was sure there was a mistake. That's no exaggeration. I was literally looking over my shoulder they're just letting me leave. And that is still with me. It's not that bad, but it's really like when it's really cold outside, that's when it'll start to be hard. And, you know, that was fairly minor damage, and that still follows me around. It's been like 30 years, you know? So lung damage is no goddamn joke. And that's why I'm sort of like, I would be okay with him being healed totally and suddenly back to normal. But the interesting thing about this is seeing how someone reacts and what they do and the ways they try and compensate, or the ways that they maybe despair sometimes, depending on like what it is. It's kind of what I want to know about characters. Ms. T says included. I think it's better to say healthcare is included. We don't say free military. I guess. Well, you know what I mean, though. Like, I nowadays I feel like it's less free, because this, like I said, was 30 years ago, and I was not a resident. I was a resident, but I was not a citizen. But for me, it was genuinely free. But, you know, doesn't matter. So they are in this valley, and poor Hugh, this kid is really going through it. Like, can't talk for long stretches. Not even long stretches. He'll say a couple of words and that'll set him off sometimes. And everybody's just sort of gotten used to either him not speaking, which he kind of seems to enjoy, not being expected to speak. Can't relate. But also, everybody is like steadily saying, don't worry, we're going to get you back on your feet. It's going to be okay, you know? And I'm not really sure exactly how many of them really believe that, and how many of them are trying to put a good face on a thing that feels pretty dire. And for her part, Candaron is really worried about Hugh. And I am realizing how much more she cares about him than I really credited with the way the last chapter ended. Like, the fact that, or last book ended, sorry. Her saying that she'll always care for him, little one, in this very affectionate way. And that she lost her child. And that she is purring while she's holding him. And all the way that she reacted when she found out he was injured. I almost called him Lou. This would feel very different if his name was Lou. But I think that she has put a kind of value on Hugh that I didn't realize. And I think Hugh deserves it, clearly. But it's feeling more and more in these chapters like, oh, okay, I underestimated this a little bit. And I really enjoy this bit. There's a moment where he says to himself, or Hugh is thinking, part of Hugh resented being coddled, but another part found it oddly comforting. And at the moment, he honestly couldn't take care of himself. He still spent most of his time sleeping. And I really understand that. There's, for me, there'd be guilt. I would just be really, I have that. And I think a lot of people do, where they feel like they have to earn the space they take up. And so I don't like being in a place that requires me to depend entirely on somebody else, and I am not able to repay them in any way, you know? So anyway, this bit here with him recovering and how he takes so long traversing this like little stretch that would have taken him a few minutes, you know, this is real slow recovery. And I enjoy very much when Godric is carrying him and he lowers his weight using like a cantrip, and Godric starts tossing him around like a ball because he's so light. That was funny. So at this point, Alestin comes back and he's wounded. I had some a run-in with Havathi. I was forced to use a contingency device Candaron gives the librarian's Errant. And Grennan, who these two don't see eye to eye at all. Says, call it what it is. It's an airborne alchemical toxin, and I still object to its use. So basically, he is just like, I fought in the Civil War and we didn't use mustard gas. I don't know why I'm making it like he's like way older, but there's a vibe to this of somebody who's older and has like really definite opinions on a thing, in a way that like Alustin definitely has his opinions, but he feels somehow less completely molded. Does that make sense? I feel like he's still formulating his opinions on things, or is at least open to other points of view, and maybe that's what gives me that impression. But yeah, so this toxin is... okay, this is crazy. Librarians Errant are given dangerous alchemical treatments for years to render us resistant to the toxin, but it's still better to avoid getting it on the skin or inhaling it. I'll need to stay behind this ward until Grennan can confirm there aren't any traces left on or inside me. Which is really something that they have to undergo that kind of... It reminds me of like The Witcher, because they have to train and take certain weird like poisons and potions and stuff that give them either abilities or resistance to those things. And Dan is saying, weird, I've read that as someone with moral objections to chemical warfare. I agree that it was moral, but that, like, I was couching it in like, well, back in my day, we didn't fight wars in that way. We didn't have to play dirty like that, because that's fucked up, you know, that kind of energy. And I'm just kind of putting of like that energy in his mouth, even though I don't have any real like basis for it, because of the way him and Alustin go on to like, what do they say? Lock horns a couple of times over these chapters. So anyway, how this is a Librarian Errant secret, and Canaron is standing right there as Alustin tells everybody about that. If we're done sharing Librarian Errant secrets, can we get on with the debrief? And he says that they're basically, the Havathi are completely mobilized. It's the largest we have seen of this from them since the last war, is what he says. So I'm assuming that's the Ithonian War. And Alustin says we've got at least a week before we have to either leave or fight. They're securing territory slowly and methodically. They're not rushing after us. When they do get closer, however, they're certainly not going to miss the valley. And I'm just going to say it now. I feel like he's really underestimating this. I don't know what kind of contingencies they have for dealing with somebody who has this like sight that Alustin has. But I feel like either he is underestimating because they want him to, or he is not considering how rude fate can be and really fuck up your plans. So that the fact that they are heading out here, and I don't think that when we open, I didn't expect Canaron to be basically staying with the group. I thought Canaron was going to take the shard and fly back like by herself, separate from the rest of the group, because Hugh was so injured that she was trying to get him to safety and get the shard to safety, and everybody else would eventually catch up. So the fact that we're all together was surprising to me, and I'm not mad about it, but I had a like idea in my head of how this was going. So we have this bit with Hugh. We find out the spellbook's name is Mackerel, which I said before, like maybe we could call him Mac. Nah, we're not doing that. It's just Mackerel. I hate it, truly. I do. And I enjoy knowing that everybody else is also like, I want to change it. Let's try and change it. Let's just try. Because there are so many things that I've read where people don't agree on the name for a ship, a building, and they do oh, that's terrible, let's change it. But the thing that they choose isn't that bad. It always feels like, I get that this is supposed to be a plot point that they hate this, but it's not hateable. It's not that bad. Mackerel is awful. Like, it's really bad. I feel like Pierce is low-key just stuck his finger in a dictionary, and the first noun, he was like, all right, well, mackerel it is, and just, there was, But anyway, Mackerel is getting along super well with Talia, which makes me so happy. You guys, there are a lot of relationships I should be like rooting for or caring about more in these books. And I'll be honest, seeing that her and Mackerel are besties now, that's a wrap for me. That's a happy ending as far as I'm concerned. Mackerel saved her love. Mackerel wanted to do something to make her happy and kept failing. And it finally won doing the thing that it wanted to be doing anyway. That's victory. And now it just sits in her lap all the time and like vibes and purrs basically while she strokes its spine and like cuddles it. I love this. I do. I love this. So anyway, this whole, like, there is a lot of Hugh being sort of yelled at by people that he should go back to bed, a nap, rest, take it easy. And then other people who are like, I think you're doing really well, like, keep it going. Alestin is one of the ones who says, it's good to see you up and about. And immediately Canderon is like, he shouldn't be up and about. That's like, don't encourage him. So when they ask Alestin, just in general, how bad it is out there, he says, you heard me say how many Havathi it killed just now, right? Oh, this is about the gas itself. That's right. Not about the like overall state of things. But yeah, there is the fact that they are closing in like this. I don't know that they anticipated it. I have to assume Canderon probably did. But, the last book ended with the Havathi talking, or I guess she wasn't saying out loud. She was thinking to herself about how Canderon is so deadly dangerous. And she is, but they have a motivation assigned to her that I don't. And it may be true, and I'm just giving Canderon more credit than they are. Or I could be being shielded from Canderon's actual intentions. I don't think so, though. I don't know. I'm really going back and forth on this. I've said before, I don't trust Canderon, and then I turn around and I'm like, well, that seemed really genuine in that moment. And I'm still pretty much on the I don't trust Canderon train. And yet I also think she's being genuine in those like moments. So people contain multitudes. I suppose it's possible that she is not doing things for great reasons and isn't as like lovely as she presents herself to be, and that she really meant everything that she said. I guess. So we get some interesting talk here about armor. And that's like chapters 2 and 3 are kind of tied together because we find out about the ways in which armor works. And there's a conversation where Arthur is talking about the way that it like redistributes force. And it's so funny, you guys. Do you ever have this where you find out about like the physics behind something and you realize that the like concept in your mind of how this works and the actual physics are completely not on the same wavelength at all? Like the way he describes it as just, it takes the force that would have been concentrated and spreads it out. I'm like, yeah, oh, that makes sense in a, like, when I stop and really think about how that would work. But I'm just like, well, it's really hard, so things can't get through, which is also part of the point. But the armor is useful against a lot of different types of weapons, not just like sharp weapons or shooting weapons. And just the basics of that, I was like, how did I not really understand that function? When he puts it that way, it opens up a lot of doors, and you can see sort of everybody who has been thinking about how armor would work for them and the way that they would approach it. It makes all of them sort of stop and go, oh, okay. And when you say it like that, maybe I've got some other ideas. And Hugh, he is coming up with something that he wants to talk to Loarna of the Vault about. But when he brings it to Alustin and says, like, I want to talk to her, Alustin says she's really private. She has difficulties with people. And the way that she handles her class, it's a symptom of that. So if you just want to have like a chat with her because you're curious about something, I don't feel like I'm okay with bothering her. And I really, really respected this, because I think this is how I get with Rashawn. I get very protective of her energy because she is not as protective of her own energy as she should be, frankly. But I wind up a lot of the time kind of weighing whether I think something is important enough to bother her with. And I'm on the camera. I'm just like so preoccupied by this weird bang. Sorry, everybody who is listening, but I'm just, you ever had that? You get sucked into looking at your own image on the screen and you're like, what is wrong with me? But I really like the fact that he is deciding whether it's worth it. And it's not like it's going to injure her. It's about respecting something that he knows is, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's like a phobia, but perhaps that's not untrue. And you really get like super neurodivergent from her. And honestly, I appreciated so much getting to see somebody who is of that mindset, but isn't a joke, because it's not treated as if she is silly or ridiculous or overreacting or anything like that in this scene. When he finally talks to her, she has to be like ordered out by Kandaron, because Kandaron's like, look, she's not coming out unless I make her come out. Like, I have to. But otherwise, the difficulty that she has, even Kandaron respects it, because she looks really upset at Kandaron being like, how could you not tell me this? And immediately Kandaron pulls back and is like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be real accusatory. It's just frustration because I want to know everything all the time. It's not, and that is something that so many people don't understand, is like, everybody handles the communications of other people totally differently. So Kandaron would likely, with a different person, have spoken much more harshly. And when they like pushed back, she'd probably, could be like, oh, shut up. You should have told me. But she's dealing with somebody that she can see is really sensitive and takes it super to heart if somebody isn't pleased with her. And she adjusts the way she communicates for this person instead of, well, she needs to get over it. It's not that big a deal. Words aren't, sticks and stones. And there's so many people who approach the world like that. They are not willing to adjust anything for the sake of the person standing in front of them. And it's wild to me. Like, why not? It's as if they think it's an imposition. And that mindset of thinking that somebody is being too demanding of you comes from a place of, I would never demand that because I don't want to cause trouble. And there's a part of me that sort of pities people who feel that way, that they aren't allowed to like draw boundaries because they don't want to be a bother. And at the same time, as much as I can understand that, because I have that myself with a lot of things, grow up. Literally get over yourself. You know, that's all I got to say to that. Dan says, we call those people assholes. Yeah, it's tough because I remember moving in that way in literally like my teens and early 20s. And once I began to realize sort of how selfish it is, and in my defense, I grew up in the 90s where so much media was just mean. It was like all the comedy and everything was about making fun of people and having a sort of superiority complex around stuff, that I think I really absorbed the vibe of like, if you are a snot, that means you have a personality and that you're funny. And so I internalized that a lot and would demand a lot because I felt very entitled to it, I guess. And when other people didn't react the way I expected, I would criticize them for being overly sensitive or reading into things or whatever. And looking back, it's just, I understand so much better now how many different types of personality are out there. And some folks, you can genuinely just be yourself and say things the way that you think them. And those are your people. Those are your closest, best friends. And those are the people that have the same vibe and know what you mean. Even when you use maybe the wrong words to say it, they get still what you're saying. And then there's the rest of the world. And, you know, that's just not always going to work with everybody. And that's fine. So anyway, I really appreciate her. And I'm hoping that we get to see more of her. But at the same time, since she doesn't like that, I hope for her sake that we don't. But I am getting ahead of myself. We haven't really met her yet. He is just telling Alestin he wants to talk to her about a recombinant non-contiguous ward, which Alestin says, that's not even good. What? That you can't do that. That's not a possible thing to do. And Hugh just smiles at him. And I got to tell you, once the student starts smirking at the teacher for not thinking something's possible that he himself has already figured out, all right, Hugh, you just graduated, kiddo. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of other things Alestin can teach you, but I feel like Ward's, you're done with him as a teacher. Like, fucking, yeah. And I know that he's being taught by Candoron, but I still felt like he could get something out of I don't know. I don't think so anymore. So the whole armor conversation, we talk about the different things that each of them would want. And Sabe is sort of the advice that she is getting from Arthur. He says, let's see, I'm trying to find this. Oh, I forgot about this. It forces an attack to waste its energy on the windshield. It's that draining, that pushing against that does the trick. And then Godric, are you even paying attention? To which Godric is like, I have heard this so many times, Dad. And honestly, I have to assume if you're getting, like, if you're growing up with Archer, probably, you know, speeches about armor, that sounds like a thing that would come up a lot. I gotta admit, lectures, yeah, that makes sense. And when Sabe asks, what's the philosophy behind your armor? Talia is like, it's fucking big. And Arthur is like, honestly, yeah, that's sort of it. Like, Alestin's armor can do wild shit. Like, it's really cool. But, I mean, I get to be real big. And that is very effective. And later on, when they're talking about, like, mobility, Alestin points out that Archer doesn't think about it the way everybody else does because his armor is so fucking humongous that it acts as a mobility aid because it moves him so quickly because it takes huge steps. So it's like he doesn't really see the value in what they're doing with their little treats, which is what I'm going to keep calling them. But Alustin, who is not walking around in giant fucking armor, is like, no, yeah, that sounds great, guys. I think this is a smart idea. So I really like that, because we're all going to have our blind spots from shit that we don't need to worry about, you know? It's like somebody talking to me about how expensive it is eating out, and I'm just like, well, then just cook at home. Cooking home is better anyway. And they're like, I don't even have a kitchen, you know? Like, that's how little I like to cook. So for the first, this whole thing with Sabe and the weaving of her abilities, I love this so much. She comes to this like conclusion that, oh, that's what Alustin wants me to do at the end of the last book. And she doesn't try it then because she knows it's a bad idea in the midst of battle. But she really feels like she like caught the fucking clue finally. And it's all, nope, Alustin doesn't think that's a good idea and was not what he intended. And all of the excitement that she felt from, she thinks, like solving the puzzle is actually her having a eureka moment, I am thinking, and being one step ahead of Alustin. And so between that and Hugh, Alustin is having a lot less faith in some of their ability to do things than he had been. He had always been trying to tell them they could do what they thought they could not. And now he's like, no, that's stupid. I don't think that will even work. And I'm like, ooh, everybody's sort of leaving you in their dust, Alustin. More like a Dustin, am I right? Hey. So yeah, she's like in disagreement with him on that. And I really am excited to see what she does with this. I'm just excited because I feel like she's going to do something new and wild. Okay, so Talia then says, I think I need my own armor. And Sabe is like, what the fuck? You've always said that basically armor's for pussies. And Talia says, look, I got shot by an arrow that was growing into a tree before my eyes and would have ripped me apart. And we find out later, she believes that shot did nerve damage because she burnt the branch out of her with Dreamfire. And now she's got all these weird fucking sensations that she thinks are like a carryover from the Dreamfire having been inside her body, which makes sense. And I really enjoy this bit of her just being like, you know, I am not always going to have eyes in the back of my head. I'm not always going to be faster than other people. I have limitations and I would have died, you know, and maybe me dying would have caused other people to, like, I have to get over it. And Sabe is like tempted to sort of smirk and be like, ha. But she can see that Talia is super serious and not like in a sheepish sort of way. She's just genuinely like, I have come around, fully get it now. And so she doesn't. And I like that because I don't know that I would have been able to restrain myself because I am a smug asshole. So then Arthur is like, well, what are you thinking you're going to make your armor out of? And Talia is like, I don't know. I've been trying to like do Dreamfire around myself, but it's super unstable. And I don't like, I haven't really been able to, even in a breeze, get it to stay in one place. And if I commissioned something that was enchanted, I mean, that would cost so much, which ideally you're hoping armor is just going to like last. So even if it is super, super expensive, I feel like maybe it'd be worth it, Talia. But, yeah, the whole concept of what she is thinking is involving a kind of ward that she wants to ask Hugh about, but she feels like he's recovering. He's so tired. And Arthur is just like, you really, really should just talk to him. Like, this is his favorite thing. And I appreciated that. And as they continue talking, what we're getting out of this conversation is that all of them want to grow more powerful, and that Archer is sort of like attempting to convince them that they can slow down. They have all the time in the world. And all of them are sort of like, dude, look, I understand you mean well, and I'm sure you believe it when you're saying that, but we just almost fucking died. And they're not waiting for us. The Havathi are going to show up, and they're going to do what they do, whether we are children that have potential or not. And we are either going to be in a place where we can defend ourselves or not. And Arthur is sort of like, I mean, there are definitely things, but there are also some others that you're sacrificing, like your future growth, or you could hurt yourself. So we'll see what he has them doing. And let's see. Oh yeah. And then magical tattoos. Arthur says, I do not know anything about that, so we'll have to talk to an expert, but I can put you guys on an accelerated curriculum. And when Godric pushes back on this, he is reminded that they have gotten this far because of like actual school, and that they each have one affinity that is way more strong than another, and they are not capitalizing on it or practicing enough with it because they are really focusing on the thing that feels much more like offensive, you know, because they want to be strong fighters, and they're all neglecting the thing that doesn't feel like it will do damage or defend themselves with, because I mean, they've been in a lot of fucking situations where that's the thing they're worried about. So I get that. Okay. We have the conversation between Candoron and Hugh, and there's a discussion about planar versus space affinities. I am not getting into that. I'm just not. But, he asks her at one point if she's been into other worlds, to which she's like, yeah, of course I have. I'm like 1,000 million years old. I've done plenty of things. But this like conversation gets interrupted by Talia showing up. And I was really surprised that she was willing to interrupt. Like the two of them, I feel like whenever they're talking, it feels like Candoron's on the clock. Like she's a really expensive lawyer and you just don't want to squander that time. And so Talia just walking up and being like, hey, what's going on, guys? I was like, what are you doing? So this is when Hugh mentions the planar affinity. I want to adapt the parts of a planar spell form that define the distances encompassed by planar spell border into a ward. And when she's like, what do you mean? He says, I want to make a recombinant non-contiguous ward. And Talia, like me, is saying, the what? Mackerel opens, draws her some diagrams, and I'm just like, jealous. I'd like to see some diagrams. Candoron says there's no way this would work. And Talia says, I mean, Hugh's pretty good. And Candoron apologizes and is like, Hugh's very good. I'm not trying to say that. I don't think this is a possibility. Like, it can't be done. And Hugh mentions Loarna. Candoron calls her out. And she looks like, as it's put in the book, like the most stereotypical librarian possible, which I thought was kind of delightful. The thing that happens here is that she comes out in the middle of Talia explaining what she has on her mind for this crazy idea. Okay. This sounds horrible to me. I was reading in the copy of Ratha's ossuary, and he was talking about how some bone mages carve glyphs in their own bones so that you always have easy access to certain spells. He personally thought it was a bit silly, but it got me thinking that maybe you could carve wards into your bones to act as armor. And this is when Loarna steps out and is like, oh, a lot of people have tried that actually. And it was very unsuccessful. And Candoron's like, yeah, see, this is a bad idea. And Loarna's like, I didn't say that. Show me where I said that, please, the screenshots, because I don't think you have receipts since I didn't. What I'm saying is that people have tried it. But magic has come a long way since a lot of those people have tried it. And, you know, if you're good enough at wards as well, I mean, there is a possibility that this could be done. And this warding has advanced significantly. We've had huge advances in ward crafting techniques since then, half of which you were involved with, Canderon said. Loarna hunched over even more when Canderon complimented her. So relatable, you guys. I swear to God. Just what is it? Hold on. I'm going to take a sip here. How is it that I, as a person, can desperately need and live on the external validation of others, and then when someone compliments me, I just want them to shut up and just not. But I need it, but I hate it. And it's not even like I really hate, not really. Of course I love it. Like, it makes me so happy. But in the moment, I want to die. And I don't know why that is. But her reaction here, I just fucking felt that. I really did. And Loarna says it's an excellent idea. The problem is in the execution, not the idea. And this is Canderon saying, well, this is a game changer. Why hasn't anyone done it before? And this is when she says people have done it, but not with bones. They would use tattoos, which has been common for like a while. But you can't ward against everything. And they will start to draw more and more mana when you like leave them on. So people are going to be running out of fuel for it. And then they tend to interfere with each other, so you couldn't have more than a small handful of people with them in close proximity, which renders them useless for armies. And that, I thought, was like really compelling, because that's a really nice little back door to leave in this ability so that this author doesn't wind up in a spot where he's like, oh shit, but all of them could have had this type of armor, and they would. So I can't do this. If you make it so that like those things interact and they can't be near other people with them, that just frees up a lot that you could fuck up in terms of plot holes. So good for you, sir. And I am going to remember the concept of like magic that interferes with itself, so that I can keep that same thing open and make sure I don't paint myself into a corner. So anyway, Hugh, of course, is like, I mean, okay, I understand everything that you guys are saying. That's all awesome. But can we mention once again that she's talking about carving her bones? To which Talia is like, dude, people can do that. I can't. I fuck myself up. But it's not an unheard of thing. And she says, Alustin has made it very clear I'm not supposed to ever use bone fire on my own bones, for fear that it would set off a chain reaction and blow me up from the inside. Fuck. Ugh. Ugh. Anyway, I thought about having healers cut me open and carve it, but then I stumbled across a passage in the ossuary that mentioned it was possible to tattoo living bone. You have to be clever so as to not tattoo the skin when putting the needles in, and they have to go past the surface of the bone. But with a thin enough needle and healers on hand, it shouldn't cause any lasting harm. No. Okay, Talia? No. I don't care if it will cause lasting harm. I am worried about the immediate harm Oh my God. That sounds like a form of torture. That is not me being cute. That sounds literally like a way to torture people. Oh my God in heaven. And you know, I'm saying this, I don't know that the surface of your bones feels anything. So maybe, but you've got to get through all kinds of areas with the needle, which is horrible enough. Like, what? No. Nope. Anyway, I hate it so much. And Hugh had an idea with a somewhat similar function to Talia's, but far more ambitious, involving non-contiguous wards, which I don't believe are even possible. They are. I made one before with the help of a greater shadow mage. Canderon sighed heavily. I think we need to have a long conversation soon. And I think you need to make more of an effort to inform me when you prove laws of magic incorrect, Loarna. I love it. She's just like, yeah, I'm just like, you know, making huge discoveries and steps forward in the technology of wards, but I'm not taking calls right now or ever. So yeah, she just like sort of vanishes after this conversation. But he's excited because he is talking to somebody who is like kind of on his level. He is approaching her level. He is probably closer to her level than a lot of people, I would think. So this bit here, Hugh tells Canderon, hey, I don't know if you were aware, but I have to tell you, I found out that I could read your communications with people. And I love this so much, guys. Canderon is basically like, babe, I know. I can always tell when that's happening, and I just like block people. It's not going to happen again. But I love the fact that she knows now that if he got information that way, it would be an accident and he would tell her. There is something about the fact that he comes clean that I think probably counts a lot for him in her eyes. And I don't know if he realizes that, but that's a pretty big deal to know for sure that somebody wouldn't keep that secret from you, even thinking you'd be mad about it, you know? I don't know. I just really appreciated that moment, the whole way that went. So anyway, I'm really having to focus here. The most of what's going on in chapter 4 is talking about the enchanted items that they're all going to take. And there's a lot of like kind of neat stuff that is described, but I don't want to get lost in the sauce talking about them, even though a lot of them seem pretty cool. There's one, I will mention just this one little thing, that it's like a flute that the holes light up, and it's supposed to be to help learn an instrument. And Hugh calls it like frivolous. And I was just like, why? If you can make the holes on something light up, why not do that? Like it just felt like it's a weird thing to call frivolous. And maybe that's because I'm an artist but come on, Hugh. And Godric says he's asking about will imbuing before they get into all of that stuff. And Alestin says, I have to confer with Arthur on any changes I make to your education, but it's possible. There are other mana techniques that might serve you better, and mages at Skyhold are seldom taught many mana techniques before they reach the journeyman level. And Emondson is like, they don't do that, Alestin, because the students have to master the basics. There's like a method to that. I don't know if you ever thought of that. And Alestin is like, I don't know if you noticed, Guy, but my students are just in a battle against the fucking Havathi, and they are alive. And one of them, like, broke Grovebringer into pieces. So I am going to say they fucking can handle it. Sit down. And I was like, ooh, he's a little salty with this guy. I'm very interested in what's going on there. If it's just a personality thing, is there a personal thing going on? I don't know. So then we have a conversation between Talia and Hugh about the things that she is looking through. And he was expecting her to go for weapons. And she tells him that basically the weapon thing, it wouldn't have helped her in the situation that she was just in. And that I have to find a way to round out the way that I handle things. So also, you got so injured that you could have died. Like, it was a really close thing. And maybe if I weren't just out here doing my own thing, I could have been nearby and I could have helped you and you wouldn't have wound up like that. So I am going to find some ways to like help defend my friends. I am going to become more well-rounded. And there's a real like subtext here of I am going to be more of a team player. Not even sub, it's pretty much text. So yeah, I liked this moment. Talia is just like queen for self-awareness. I really love her. So let's see, there's all kinds of things here that are the one that I'm of course the most interested in because I am poor is the rod that you just stick in a stream and it gets covered in gold, which is amazing. And there's a mention of how the fact that they're all getting first dibs on the shit from Ithos is like, it's Candor on playing favorites and everybody knows it. So the thing that they choose are boots. And they all have like a different pair that does a slightly different thing. But it's about mobility and the fact that if they can't all keep up with each other, they can't perform as a team. And I really, really appreciated this because I'm not going to say that this means they'll never get split up again. I'm sure they have to split up all the time. But I'm covering One Piece, and there is a huge power differential between members of the team. And sometimes that's what makes it interesting, but sometimes it makes it frustrating, where one character can wind up on the other side of a city in like 5 minutes, and everybody else is just fucking stuck. Like, that's part of where the stories come from because of them getting split up like that. But I am looking forward to seeing a story where our people are working to stay together a little bit more. And it's not always just like, oh, I'm lost, help me. So they are able to all find boots that fit, which Godric is like, that's wild. I didn't think that I was going to be able to find a pair. But then it says, Godric's surprise vanished when he read in the dossier that these particular boots had belonged to a Lothalan rust mage in Havath's employ, who a Lustan had slain during battle, whereupon the surprise was replaced by mild discomfort. Oof. Yeah, that's rough. So the whole, like, the boots are, as I said, have different things. Talia's got mana reservoirs in hers, and it also cleans up her tracks, which is dope. And Hugh's are absurdly comfortable, made out of like some fur. And I appreciated that it specifically says appeared far more resistant to grime and compression than lamb's wool, because honestly, I have owned a couple of like lamb's wool pairs of slippers, and they're touted as like the be all end all of slippers, but they get so gross so fast. They are not worth the money, at least in my opinion. So I'm like, oh, he found a way to make a pair that's actually going to be nice forever. I've got a monstrously overpowered pair that should be able to work with my armor and should play well with my new toy. And that's all he says, and I really want to know what that means, but we're not going to get anything from him about that. So So Sabe says that she's got goggles that are good for dealing with illusionists. Godric points out the belt that Hugh has, and that he's going to make a replacement strap. And the belt, it says it's a long, thin one that he's attaching to the loops of the bindings. And when he says that he doesn't understand why Hugh is using that particular belt, Hugh doesn't answer. And again, why? What is it about that belt? What's it made out of? What's the enchantment on it? What are you doing? Very, very curious. And then Godric has this opal. This is so hysterical to me, you guys. He's just got a fucking strobe light stone, a rave stone that is just meant to get attention and maybe blind enemies or distract or whatever. The whole thing is that he's playing into his role as the lightning rod that his dad told him. And so he bought a disco ball, and he's just going to have that be part of his... For the record, I love this. He's planning to put it into his helmet. I'm very excited about it. It would be amazing if he figured out some... in the Dresden Files, there is a character named Molly who does what she calls her one-woman rave. And it's basically, she's super good at illusion magic, and she can create music as well. So she can create a full sensory experience up to touch. She can't do touch. That really fucks with the concentration of the people that they are fighting. And she has these huge, musical numbers and stuff that she pulls out. So, and it's effective, So I would love if Godric became a one-man rave. I really would. We don't have to go in that direction quite as hard as Molly, but I'm just saying, as somebody who is frequently too much, the idea of too much being a weapon is kind of dope. So let's see. Oh, there's a mention of Sabe's spear, and it's sort of a weird thing because Godric says Sabe's new spear is pretty self-explanatory. Talia glowered at that, still grumpy about Sabe's choice, unreasonably so in Godric's opinion. Talia hadn't even wanted the short spear. And what is the deal with the spear also? I want to know. Why is Talia mad about it? Is it just because she kind of regrets losing the time where she could just focus on weapons? Is that all it is? Anyway, okay, so let's see. Alestin says that he thinks that they have all chosen well. And let's see. After lunch, the various librarians errant were bustling about madly, preparing for their departure. Godric wasn't sure what to do with himself at first, and was considering going down to the lake to practice his lithification spells, until his father called him over to help do the dishes after lunch. We stand a king, okay? He's gonna do the fucking dishes. Show me another warrior barbarian on this level that's out here volunteering to do the dishes. Non-toxic masculinity, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. Perfect. Love it. And there's some talk about the way that they're going to be traveling is going from one lost home to another is what they're called. And evidently these are just buildings that are sort of left along, they're empty and abandoned and used for shelter by whoever comes across them. And he says that there have been some that are basically bus stops, and then there are ones that are actual palaces. And I am so interested in seeing some of these. We are just leaving one, but we don't get a lot of the time in it, in the next chapter. I love this moment too. Godric says, "Hey, Dad, I feel like my life is kind of out of control and everything just keeps happening to me and I can't keep up with it and I'm sort of freaking out." And oh man. And his dad is like, Oh, yeah, that sounds rough. It is rough, actually, because that's what means you're growing up. Oh, Godric, I am so sorry, bruh. There is no greater mistake I have ever made in my life than wanting to get older. What a scam. Ugh. I truly did not understand the fine print on that at all. I want to opt out. Ugh. Anyway. And I like too that Arthur is like, by the way, you think Candoron's got it together. Look at this bitch and the expression on her face when she's looking at Hugh. She does not have it together. She does not feel in control. And then as Godric is walking away, he turns around and he sees the look on his dad's face that Candoron has on her face. And he's like, huh. And I'm like, yeah, Godric. Huh, indeed. Maybe your dad loves you, dude. What do you think? Anyway. So then we go to the last of these chapters, Salt Flats. And this is, this is so, it seems a little excessive to me too, Hugh. Candoron had annihilated the way station behind them so the Havathi couldn't use or study it. And then followed it up with a starbolt rendering the field of dust into a field of glass. Yeah, man, maybe it's a little bit much. I gotta agree with you. We have Lustin who is arguing with Arthur because he wanted to go to the agricultural research station, which he's actually been to before, we find out. And he's doing all of this stuff with like growing, or they are, all this stuff with growing different types of cabbages and things. And Sabe is like, I heard that they're trying to build a cabbage house, and who would ever want to live in that? Like, to which Talia says, I don't think that sounds so bad. And Sabe is like, yeah, you fucking wouldn't. Of course you'd be somebody who would live in a cabbage house. And I do kind of enjoy this interaction. So they arrive in the afternoon, and this is a weapons testing facility, which basically it is completely like out in the middle of nowhere. And this is really something. Where the last valley had been lush and green, this one was barren, white, and almost perfectly level. It was a salt flat several leagues across. So rainwater collects, and the soil is so dense, it won't seep into the ground. So then it just evaporates, and all of the salt that the water picks up as it's rolling downward gets left in the trench once it evaporates. And all of the way that it's so level is because of all of the weapons testing. So this is a place where people go to bring shit that they want to try out that they have not gotten right yet. And they need some room, and they need to make sure nobody is going to get hurt. So I love Talia. This salt tastes terrible. And Sabe is like, why would you lick it? And then that little section after this is her just being like, Talia, stop it. Stop licking it. She keeps doing it. But yeah, it's not salt like table salt. There's all different types. And there's probably also some weird shit mixed in from magic. So everybody's like, Talia, girl, wait, what are you doing? Don't do this. And we have a moment with Godric. He says, this doesn't feel real. I grew up knowing Skyhold was impregnable and that nobody would ever attack it. And Talia's like, but Corey attacked. And he says, yeah, but he was inside already. And I was like, no, that does make sense to me. I get what he means. It's a totally different thing when it's like, well, you know, somebody who was already in turned bad. But it's a different thing to be the rotten egg in the barrel. And it's another thing to be like, I'm just going to bust into that barrel. So we have a conversation here about whether Havath has a chance. And Sabe is basically like, I really don't know, because they are supposed to be pretty badass. And we've got our people, but I don't know who's on their side, and they may have some people they've kept secret, although that would probably be really hard because it's nonstop spies, like wall to wall and fucking, like, and also people who can have that far seeing. But they also are thinking about whether they've got some huge weapon, and it's sort of like a nuke conversation. Just how far would they go and what could they do? And Sabe says, all right, everybody, we are going to test out your boots. And the only one who cannot do this is Hugh. Okay? Because you are going to crash so much. And he is just getting better, and he is not going to be doing that. And Hugh is very irritated. But then he sees them later covered in bruises and salt and is like, all right, I guess. And yeah, that is the end of chapter 6. So this is a good section. A very promising start to this book. I'm very invested. And I maintain that my favorite relationship is between Talia and Mackerel. OTP. Okay. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Thank you again, Dan, for allowing me to move this to a different day so that I could take care of Sam a little bit better. I appreciate you so much. And I just really hope everybody who's listening is enjoying the coverage. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.